Pete Alonso and the Mets have a significant gap. The Mets offered Teoscar Hernandez a 2-year deal, and Corbin Burnes signed with who? All of that on today's episode of the Bleav in Mets podcast. Welcome in, Chris Schubert, Jack McKessie here with you. Lots of news, lots of notes, lots of rumors, lots of rumblings. Not a whole lot of activity when it comes to the New York Mets and their pursuit of more offense in 2025, but a lot for us to unpack. Jack, hope the holidays treated you well. You are in a different location. You are traveling. You are holding your microphone in your hand, which is always a struggle when we do these podcasts on the road. How are you, my friend?
I am doing well, Chris. There's a lot going on right now in the world of sports, in the world of baseball, in the world of me personally, just moving around a lot right now this week with the holidays, but excited to be back talking about the Mets. It was a nice little break, but a lot to still talk about with this team and the rest of the baseball free agent market.
There's no type of travel like travel as a podcaster where you have to pack your regular stuff for whatever trip you're going on, but then you also have to bring the podcasting equipment and the microphone and the wires and make sure you have the right laptop and all the chargers. It is just an extra level of stress that I don't think most people can relate to, because traveling and packing is enough as it is. But when you are a podcaster and you have to take all your equipment, cameras, everything, it's so easy to just forget one little cord and then it ruins the whole thing. So we have a lot to get into, but before we do that, got to tell you about Bet Online. They continue to be the world's most trusted betting platform and your number one source for online betting. From the earliest odds to in-game live betting, Bet Online provides you with all the action and the ability to watch the games as they happen with the largest selection of odds on everything from football, the NBA, and college basketball, NHL to UFC. Just head on over to Bet Online today and don't forget to use our promo code Bleav, that's BLEAV, for your welcome bonus on your first deposit. Bet Online, the game starts here. I would like to very quickly start, before we dive into the weeds, a big shout out to all of you that listen to this show, because since Jack and I took over at the beginning of September, this is month 4 for us doing this podcast. December 2024 is the best month since we took over this show. That is credit to all of you. We've also been pumping out a lot of content this month, a lot of reaction to Juan Soto and Sean Manaea and all the news. I know that definitely probably helps the numbers, but big shout out to all of you guys that have been consuming this content. And we are ending, this episode will be out before we start 2025, but we have a lot of cool plans. Jack and I are going back and forth on a lot of cool things to do in 2025. So we're really excited, and we hope that you stick on the journey and share this with your friends and fellow Mets fans. All right, Jack, let's start with the elephant in the room, or the polar bear in the room at this point, because we keep seeing the calendar days turn, and we are very close to it being 2025, and there feels like there is no movement on Pete Alonso. Here's where we stand. John Heyman reported there was a significant gap between where the Mets and Pete Alonso stood. That was very clearly Scott Boras trying to pursue the Mets into making a deal happen a little bit quicker. And then a little bit after that, we heard a kind of rumored contract offer that the Mets had put in front of Pete Alonso. This didn't come from Jeff Passan. It didn't come from Buster Olney. Heyman didn't come from any of the big three in the sport. But that reported contract was 3 years, $90 million. And so when you pair significant gap with what the Mets are offering, it is very clear the message that is being sent right now is Pete is not going to sign right now because he is not getting what he wants, because the New York Mets and David Stearns have played this perfectly. And so this is the ultimate high-stakes game of chicken. The Mets feel no urge to move this forward until another suitor potentially comes into the mix that maybe drives the price up. But the Mets feel very comfortable, evident by they made an offer to Jock Peterson. Evident, we'll talk about this in a little bit. They made an offer to Teoscar Hernandez. The Bregman rumors won't go away. They have zero issue pursuing offense elsewhere. They're very willing to let this Pete market kind of sit. So your initial thoughts on significant gap, and we now have at least the framework of a deal that they offered him, a 3-year, $90 million deal, which is a higher AAV than any of the first basemen got, but it's obviously a shorter term.
So this really takes me back to our conversation last time about what the free agent market looks like for first baseman, and even the trade market, just the market in general, I guess, for first baseman right now is pretty dry. There's not a lot of potential landing spots for Pete at this point, and that means the Mets have all of the leverage in the negotiations going forward. And as a result, I think that's a big part of why this market has, or Pete's market has taken so long to iron itself out, I guess, for lack of a better phrase. He doesn't have much power. He and Boras don't have much power, but they still are looking for a longer term and higher value contract than what the Mets are prepared to give him. My thoughts are, Chris, this rumored 3-year, $90 million deal, I think that's a great offer for the Mets. I think for Pete, it's the highest AAV he's going to get easily, but obviously the longer term and the higher value contract are much more in line with what he and Scott Boras are looking for right now. it's really just going to come down to who blinks first, I think. I don't know how many other suitors there are for Pete. I haven't heard a ton of other rumors from other teams on him being connected anywhere else. So it really seems like either the Mets bring in someone else, someone like Alex Bregman, or another DH option now that Jock Peterson and Teoscar Hernandez are off the board, or Pete ends up settling with the offer that he got from the Mets. And that offer, that 3-year, $90 million offer, could get worse as time goes on because, again, the Mets still have all of the leverage right now.
I think my big takeaway from the 3 years 90, and let's face it, we don't know if this is an actual offer that was put in front of Pete, but it's the first number that's been thrown out there since the original, what was it, 7/158 deal that he was offered extension before he hit free agency. So let's just take it at face value. We can play it out here on the show. It's a $30 million AAV, which would be the highest out of any of the first basemen have gotten. It's just short term. It's $90 million. But I think the way that the contract is structured tells us a lot. It tells us David Stearns and the Mets are very steadfast. We are not paying Pete Alonso for 5 or 7 years. It's not happening. You missed the boat there. You missed the boat. We're not going to 7. 7's not happening. You might be able to get us to 5 if another suitor comes in and drives up the price, but you're not getting to 7. We are very willing to walk away at 7. And 2, this is David Stearns' masterclass. We continue to use that phrase on the show all the time, but sure, buddy, we'll give you a high AAV, but it's on a short-term deal, and you'll have to hit free agency again. The same thing they did with Sean Manaea. They were never going to go to 5 years for Sean Manaea. They were very comfortable living in the 3-year range. David Stearns, unless it's for Juan Soto, who, again, nice friendly reminder as we turn into 2025, just want to let everyone know Juan Soto is a New York Met. He will be playing for the New York Mets in 2025. That unless it is a big fish like that, David Stearns is super just calm, cool, collected, strategic. He knows what he wants to offer players, and he knows where his comfort level is to maybe go outside of that structure, but he's not going to spend like a drunken sailor. He's not going to do it. He's going to acquire talent. He's going to get Sean Manaea. He's going to get Clay Holmes. He's going to get Frankie Montas, but he's not going to go out there and spend $150 million on Pete Alonso if he doesn't think it makes sense. And I think that's what you see in this offer. Pete, you don't have a market. That's what David Stearns and the Mets are saying to Pete Alonso. You don't have a market. We want you to be back here. We know how much the fan base wants it. We know how much you want it. We are willing to go that extra mile. We're willing to go to a $30 million AAV. That's the concession that we're making to you. The concession we're asking from you to us is it's only going to be for 3 years. And if you want to have just an absolute gangbusters 3 years and try to hit the market again and parlay that into another 2-year deal and make the 150 over the 5 years of that contract, so be it. But the Mets feel no urgency. Why? Alex Bregman is still out there. Why? Anthony Santander is still out there. Why? There are a bunch of different teams that might want to trade a bat for an arm or might want to trade a bat for some pitching, and the Mets can tap into their prospect capital if they want to go out and get a bat. There is no urgency because the market isn't creating it. Now, maybe Teoscar Hernandez coming off the board, maybe Corbin Burnes coming off the board spurs a team like the Giants to get back into it. They're the team that's now being floated out there as, oh, they missed on Burnes. They were probably in there. Now maybe they turn that money into pairing more offense. They already got Willy Adames. Maybe they now pair him up with Pete Alonso. But that feels very much like a scare tactic. And I'm here to tell you, David Stearns isn't going to get bullied into giving a 5th year. He's just not. He's going to put an offer in front of Pete Alonso and say, here you go, buddy. We're going to offer you a higher AAV than the Giants are going to give you. They might give you a longer term, but we're going to give you a higher AAV. That's how it's going to play. And so, look, I think the reality of the situation is, Jack, they just misplayed this. And it's up to Pete to decide, is he going to swallow his pride and take what is a very team-friendly deal in what the Mets are offering, but it allows us to come to a peaceful resolution because there is no pressure on the New York Mets. If the New York Mets felt pressure to get this done, they would have gotten it done 2 weeks ago. They feel no pressure right now to get this done. The market isn't applying that pressure to them, and their current roster situation isn't applying that pressure to them. They can go out and sign Alex Bregman. Heck, I was thinking about this morning driving. I had a 90-minute drive this morning. I was thinking about this morning. David Stearns is an absolute madman. There's a chance he might say, Mark Vientos, go play first base. Brett Baty, you're the starting third baseman on opening day. I mean, he is that crazy. That's how much of a madman he is, and that's a possibility. Ronnie Mauricio, your ACL's healed 2 months into the season. Boom, you're the starting third baseman. I mean, that's how crazy he could be. So there is no pressure, and I think that works in the Mets' favor. And so we'll see. Jack, my gut is this is going on for another at least 6 weeks. Like, I don't see a resolution here anytime soon.
Yeah, I don't see any resolution, and I don't see a resolution that happens because the Mets feel forced to do it. Like, no. you said it perfectly just now. There's no reason for the Mets to go up to 5 to 7 years anymore with this contract negotiation. And I think that idea of having a shorter term contract, higher AAV, really lines up with not just David Stern's philosophy from what we've seen so far on the contracts he's given out, obviously besides Juan Soto, who's the white whale of this free agency period. It's getting quality players on short-term deals with medium to high AAV, or in some cases like Clay Holmes, Frankie Montas, a little bit lower. But that means that going forward into the future, prospects can come up and contribute to the Mets organization, or the Mets can be players in a new free agent market next year or the year after that. These short-term deals allow for a lot more flexibility. It doesn't tie the Mets down with long-term albatross contracts, which, like I was saying, doesn't align just with David Stern's philosophy and what he's done so far, but also aligns with the exact same philosophy that the owner, Steve Cohen, has said from the moment that he bought the team. We're not going to spend like drunken sailors. We're going to work to build not just our MLB roster, but our depth in the minors, our development throughout the minors and the majors, and become a kind of take what the Dodgers have done in the West and take that blueprint, morph it into something the Mets can do, and not only bring in players that they're buying off the free agent market or trading for, but also developing their own players and allowing them to contribute in short order. I think because you're giving Pete an offer for only 3 years, you're giving Sean Manaea an offer for only a few years, Frankie Montas only a couple of years. These are deals that suggest that the Mets have faith in their upcoming talent and want to give them a chance to contribute going forward past, 2026, 2027 and beyond.
When David Stern speaks, I tend to listen because he kind of has some GM speak to him, but he tells the truth. And he's been pretty clear on this. He doesn't want to arbitrarily, by choice, make a decision and lock the team into a player if they have people in the pipeline that they want to contribute. Yeah. It's partially why you haven't seen them do anything with Ronnie Mauricio, Luisangel Acuna, Jet Williams, and all the guys that they have, because they want to keep their options open. Like, I was looking at this the other day, and this is a complete tangent, but I was looking at the depth chart and the payroll setup for the Mets over the next couple of years. Jeff McNeil has 2 more years left on his deal, and then there's a club option in 2027. I can tell you right now, that club option is being declined. Right now, December 28th, 2024, when we are recording this, that club option is going to be declined. Edwin Diaz's club option in 2028 for $17.25 million is going to be declined. David Stearns operates roster flexibility. You get a Juan Soto, a Francisco Lindor, I don't need roster flexibility with those guys. But how many teams, even the Dodgers, let's very quickly look at the Dodgers because I think this is very important. When you look at their depth chart for this year, Michael Conforto is going to start in left field for them this year. It was the guy they signed this offseason. Tommy Edman, a guy who they signed to an extension this offseason after trading for him. They traded for him in the middle of the year, was not part of their plans. They keep roster flexibility. Is Gavin Lux absolutely the long-term answer at second base? They played Mookie Betts there at points this year. So there are positions, even on the defending World Series champion Los Angeles Dodgers, that are open in order to create roster flexibility. Yes, Shohei Ohtani is going to be the DH. Yes, Mookie Betts is going to be the shortstop. Yes, Freddie Freeman is going to be the first baseman. But I will ask you this, Jack. After those 3 guys, Teoscar Hernandez, Max Muncy, Will Smith, Tommy Edman, Michael Conforto, Gavin Lux, in 2 or 3 years, 3 of those guys might be different. If you don't have superstars, and you can't in modern baseball, unless you're going to spend $450 million on a payroll, you can't do that. And so you have to create that roster flexibility. And signing Pete Alonso to a 5 or 7 year deal basically log jams. Guess what? You want the perfect example of why you don't do it this way? Look at the New York Yankees and the position that they find themselves in. They have landlocked their DH spot to Giancarlo Stanton because he can't play the field. Landlocked. Since he's gotten there, he's been the DH. Aaron Judge is not going to be able to play outfield long-term, is going to be moved to first base for the second half of that deal, and then is going to be stuck there until Stanton's gone, and then he's going to transition to a DH. You can't lock in positions. You can't lock in more than 3 or 4 positions for more than 5 or 7 years because that's just not how baseball is played. And so this is David Stearns doing that. He's like, great, I'll keep it for 3 years, but I need that flexibility to be able to, if this doesn't work, I can wash my hands of it, put an opt-out in the deal. You have a great season. You want to opt out, go ahead. But we're going to keep this flexibility for ourselves. So I think the Pete negotiations is an example of 2 things, and then we can move on to Teoscar. Thing number 1 is David Stearns is not emotional. He cares that Pete has been a lifelong Met, but it's not going to force him to go outside of where he's comfortable spending. And 2, this negotiation with Pete Alonso is the just bird's eye view of how David Stearns is going to negotiate the roster of this team. Like, use this. Like, this is, for Mets fans, the perfect example of how he is going to build this team. So get used to it. This is how it's going to be. This is how it's going to be.
Yeah, and I wouldn't even point only to the Yankees with, the potential future that they have or the potential issues that they might have because of the albatross contracts they've handed out. We've seen it play out this way before with another Los Angeles team. Look at the Los Angeles Angels. They hamstrung themselves with contracts like the Mike Trout one, the Rendon, the Albert Pujols, and they're still in a perpetual rebuild because they tied themselves into knots trying to keep these star players into and past their primes. And as a result, they're constantly having to tear things down, refigure some parts of their roster, and make some crazy moves to try to put together a team that can compete. And they haven't been that competitive. So when you think about David Stearns and what he's been doing and the philosophy Steve Cohen laid out when he bought the team, this is not going to be a team. This is not going to be a regime that hands out monster contracts. They're just not going to do it. I don't think under any circumstances they're going to hand out something that's 6-7 years to Pete Alonso just because they want to keep him a lifelong Met. They, like you said, there's sentiment. There's understandable sentimentality with Alonso as a homegrown talent and with the power that he's brought over the last 6 years. But if he's not worth that money, they're not going to pay him for 6-7 years.
Take Juan Soto off the table, okay? Unique unicorn, white whale, 26-year-old free agent. Doesn't happen in sports. You take it off the table. Here are the players with guaranteed salaries on the 2025 New York Mets. Lindor signed a 10-year deal. David Stearns didn't sign that one. Sean Manaea, 3-year deal. Stearns. Brandon Nimmo, 8-year deal. Not Stearns. Starling Marte, 4-year deal. Not Stearns. Edwin Diaz, 5-year, $102 million deal. Not Stearns. Frankie Montas, 2-year, $34 million deal. Kodai Senga, 5-year, $75. Not David Stearns. Clay Holmes, 3-year, $38 million. David Stearns. 4 years, $50 for Jeff McNeil. Not David Stearns. Griffin Canning, 1 year, $4.25 million. David Stearns. There you go, folks. Like, that's it. There's your blueprint.
3 is the magic number.
There's not a single deal on here that David Stearns, again, Juan Soto excluded. There's a Juan Soto rule that we're going to exclude for the sake of this conversation. He's not going to give out long-term deals. Not to players that are past 30 years old. It's not happening. It's not going to happen. This is David Stearns saying, I can develop players. I'm going to put in the infrastructure with Steve's money and the organizational structure to develop players to where if we're going to give out those deals, it's going to be our guys. Everybody gets super upset about the Braves and all this swindling that they're able to do for Acuna and Albies and all their young players, right? Guess what? That's what David Stearns is going to do if he can get this pipeline going. And you're going to see the Mets do those types of things. The way they do it with the Dodgers, the way the Diamondbacks did it with Corbin Cowell, right? Those types of deals. That's where the Mets are going to strike. They're not going to do this every single offseason where they're going to give out super mega contracts. It's just not going to happen. They did try to give out a contract. It was only a 2-year deal, but they apparently made a 2-year offer to Teoscar Hernandez. And I don't necessarily think I'm that upset that Teoscar Hernandez chose to go back to the Dodgers and didn't pick the Mets, but it is telling, Jack. The Mets are in search of offense with or without Pete Alonso. There is more offense coming to this team. We saw it that they were interested in Jock Peterson. They made an offer to Teoscar Hernandez. And my thought, if you're interested in giving an offer to Jock Peterson, who can't play defense, if you're interested in giving an offer to Teoscar Hernandez, who can't play defense, that low-year, high AAV deal to Anthony Santander is coming in real quick. David Stearns is just going to slide that bad boy across the table. Oh, Anthony, how's a nice little 3-year deal here for you at a super high AAV to be our DH. That just feels like what David Stearns is cooking. If you're going to go after a defensive liability in Peterson and a defensive liability in Teoscar Hernandez for DH, why not do the same thing with Santander? That was my immediate thought when I saw that was what they did with Teoscar Hernandez.
I didn't even think about that, honestly. I just thought about how, dang, I was almost right on my Mets ideal offseason because I did include Teoscar Hernandez in that conversation. But it's fascinating because the Mets have never really had a reliable option as kind of a DH-only player since it came to the NL in, I think, 2022. Even going back to 2020 when it was a 1-year thing at the time, they've never had solid production from the DH spot. That's been one of their weak points since the rule change. And obviously, with the possible offers to Teoscar, to Jock Peterson, with Anthony Santander still on the board, they want power. They want to add more power to a lineup that has some with Juan Soto, with Francisco Lindor. But outside of that, with Pete Alonso not on the roster, with Mark Vientos too, sorry, Mark. But with Pete Alonso not on the roster, they're looking to build up the power in this lineup. And they're looking to do it in any way that they can, even if it's for another outfielder in what already is kind of a crowded room with Marte under contract, Nimmo, Jose Siri, Tyrone Taylor, obviously Juan Soto, Drew Gilbert down in the minors coming up. So they're looking for these DH options. That much is clear. These are not, platoon outfielders that they're looking to because they're not really good at defense. They're just looking for power, and they're going to try to get it any way they can. And Chris, I love the Anthony Santander shout out because I think that would be a perfect move for the Stearns philosophy and what the Mets are still looking for in this lineup.
Santander, 30 years old. Jock Peterson, 33. Teoscar Hernandez, 32. Anthony Santander, switch hitting DH. He's your everyday DH against whoever's pitching. He's 2 years younger than guys that you made offers to this offseason. You could offer him a 3 or a 4 year deal, super high AAV, and just there you go. Plug him in as your DH just for the next couple of years. Give yourself some offense. And so I wonder if missing out on Teoscar, missing out on Jock Peterson, if Anthony Santander is the next guy up. It was just my initial reaction to seeing that they offered a deal to Teoscar is that they might be trying to cook something up with Santander here now. Next.
It makes a little too much sense, Chris. It really feels like it makes a whole lot of sense.
Yeah, we'll see. I mean, that would certainly be the icing on top of the cake that is this offseason for the New York Mets. Something that maybe some of us thought could happen if the market didn't materialize was a super low year, high AAV deal for Corbin Burnes. That is not the case because he signs a 6-year, $210 million deal with the checks notes Arizona Diamondbacks, who give out their biggest contract to a free agent in franchise history. Their previous mark was the 6-year, $205.5 million deal they gave out to Zach Greinke. It was in that range, I think it was 205.5 to Zach Greinke. So the highest deal they've ever given out to a free agent ever, $210 million to Corbin Burnes. Jack, I guess here the two things that I would ask you. One, upset that the Mets didn't go 6-2-10 with a bunch of deferrals for Corbin Burnes. And then two, how much do you like this move for the Diamondbacks, and do you like it as much as I do? Because I will heap praise on the D-backs here in a second.
Yeah, I feel like it just all comes back to the David Stearns philosophy of we're not going to hand out these long-term contracts to pitchers who are on the, quote, wrong side of 30. And 6 years, $210 million. I know you said there are deferrals, but that's still $35 million a year before the deferrals.
Mm-hmm.
That's the kind of money that I think Stearns and Cohen are kind of iffy on spending on any pitcher. Like we saw it with Sean Manaea, who was arguably the top of kind of that second tier of pitchers. They gave him a 3-year deal. They're not really going far past that 3-year mark for any pitcher so far in this regime. And to answer your other question, Corbin Burnes is a phenomenal pitcher. He was the number 2 free agent this offseason behind Juan Soto. He is far and away the best, pure free agent, not including Roki Sasaki, who has different rules, but pure free agent pitchers on this market. And for the Diamondbacks to bring in someone like that, not only do they get to pair up 2 outstanding players named Corbin for the next several years, but they bolster a rotation that was in need of it after the Jordan Montgomery contract fiasco, and really are starting to threaten the NFC West hierarchy that we know contains the Dodgers and the Padres at the top. But I would argue, Chris, that the Diamondbacks now, with their current rotation, with the way their lineup is starting to shape into form, if guys like Corbin Carroll can get going earlier in the year and avoid slumps, like that's a team that's going to be contending for the division potentially, if not, one of the top wildcard spots in the NL.
I just want to correct you. You called it the NFC West to tell you that your football brain is still on, because
it is very much still on.
You are watching Broncos Bengals in an AFC West versus AFC North clash. So your football brain is still on, but the NL West.
Thank you.
Listen, I am not that upset that the Mets didn't go here. They were never going to go here. They were never going to have a deal that started with a 6 for a starting pitcher. Just not going to happen under David Stearns. And you worry about the back half of this deal. There are some opt-outs in there. But at the end of the day, Corbin Burnes picked here because this is where he lives. He lives in Arizona. He just had twins. And, I couldn't imagine just having twins and then needing to be a dad to twins and then also relocate your entire life.
And to New York,
right?
Potentially.
Or anywhere, right? Even if it was back to Baltimore, if it was to the job, wherever. He gets to He gets to have spring training where he lives. So every night he gets to go home to his new family. He doesn't have to relocate at all. Most of his road trips are going to be what? San Francisco, San Diego, LA, right? Like Colorado, like close. You're going to play those teams the most, right? And so that's a benefit too. And if he pitches well over the next 2 years, he's going to rip up the deal and hit free agency again. So I can't necessarily, I don't think the Mets would have been able to play on that level, especially when there were reports out there that he turned down less money or more money from other teams to take this deal with the Diamondbacks. I got to tell you, the NL West is, in the old Westerns when everybody comes out of the saloon and it's just a big duel, that's the NL West. The NL West is the shootout at the OK Corral. Because it is the Dodgers, it is the Padres, the Diamondbacks are there, the Giants don't want to be forgotten about. And what I love about the Diamondbacks, and it's a team that I know near and dear, I'm a radio host here in Arizona, so it's a team I cover on a pretty regular basis outside of what we do here for the Mets. I love this approach of, hey, we lost Christian Walker and Jock Peterson. Tough to replace those guys on offense. So here's what we're going to do, everybody. We're just going to stop you from scoring runs. Maybe we're not going to be able to score as many runs, but we're going to stop you from scoring runs because we've got Corbin Burnes. We've got Zach Gallen. We've got Merrill Kelly. We've got Eduardo Rodriguez. We have Brennan Pfaadt and Ryan Nelson, two of the better young starters in the game to build around. Oh, yeah, Jordan Montgomery's still kind of hanging around. So the question that I have now is who gets moved? Do they move Zach Gallen? Do they move Jordan Montgomery? Do they move Ryan Nelson? Which arm is the person that is left out? Because Corbin Burnes ain't going anywhere. Merrill Kelly's not going anywhere. He's on a $7 million deal. And Brendan Pfaadt's not going anywhere. And I don't think you can move the remaining 3 years of that Eduardo Rodriguez contract. So it's three guys that are available. And you just wonder, somebody's going to be left out of a spot. And that's how the Diamondbacks are going to claw back some of this money because their payroll right now, last year, was $173 million at the end of the year. It was the highest in team history coming off of their World Series appearance. It's now at 189. Now, it doesn't factor in the deferrals, but that's just what it's at right now. And so with the deferrals and maybe moving one of these guys, they can get it back close. But there's some cost cutting that needs to be taking place here because they don't have an RSN. They don't have a TV deal. Major League Baseball runs their TV. So they're not getting TV money, yet they're about to spend the most money they've ever spent in franchise history. So something has to give. And I wonder if there's a market that's going to develop for one of these starters. But I love this move. And I'll tell you, for a Mets team that obviously I think has dreams of winning the division, but other than that, your fallback is the wild card. You thought the wild card this year was stressful. The wild card in 2025 is going to be stressful because only 3 teams can win divisions. And everybody else is going to be battling it out. And I don't think the Padres are going to go quietly. Diamondbacks almost won 90 games a year ago. Giants are improved. You would expect the Braves to be better than they were a year ago. There's a lot of teams. The Cubs appear to be going forward a little bit. So there's a lot of stuff to just pay attention to. And so the National League is, man, it's the wild, wild west in a lot of ways. It is going to be a lot of fun. But Corbin Burnes off the board. Now Jack Flaherty is the best starter available in free agency?
Yeah, I think that's right. The Diamondbacks question is interesting. I feel like, obviously, we've had the conversation about Jordan Montgomery before, but it seems like that's kind of what might end up happening is the Diamondbacks packaging Montgomery with another one of those pitchers or perhaps another player to kind of get that money off of their books, given, his lack of success last year. But yeah, I mean, it's going to be a tough back and forth slugfest, and not just the NL West, but the whole National League wildcard race is going to have a lot of interesting moments, and a lot will be up in the air going down the stretch next season. I can tell you that.
Yeah, I mean, maybe this is just me being in baseball mode and we're doing this podcast, but I'm already excited to watch Diamondbacks games this year when they play the Dodgers and the Padres and the Giants. I'm excited to watch as much NL West baseball as I can because I legitimately think it's hard for baseball to do this, right? It's hard, 162 games. That division race might captivate the entire season. That might be from start to finish. It is a roller coaster ride that is a made for TV movie. That's how good 4 of the teams, and the Rockies are just there doing whatever they're doing. But you have 4 teams that are really kind of going for it, and it's really cool to see. It's really fun. And I'll just tell you personally, being here, the reaction today, being around town, seeing people excited, they just signed a guy in free agency to the biggest contract they've ever given out. You can feel it. You can feel it almost instantly. And so I think the way that I would wrap this back into closing about the Mets is there's still work to be done. We keep saying this. There's offense to put together. This team probably needs another starter. We're waiting on the Roki Sasaki news. Like, the work is not done for this team. They need to improve. Great year last year. They landed Juan Soto. They've improved in a lot of areas, but there is still room to get better so that 2025 they are competing for a division and they avoid being a part of whatever this wild card mess is going to be down the stretch. So that's kind of where I would leave that. So wanted to sneak in a weekend episode here for everybody because of the holidays. We will be back regularly scheduled programming next week. We are going to our 2025 New Year's resolution here on the Bleav in Mets podcast is to nail down a set release schedule for this pod. But the holidays from Thanksgiving through New Year's, it's just crazy to record. So we are going to try to nail down a set schedule. You'll probably get a Monday release, probably get a middle of the week release, and then a weekend release. It's kind of where we're thinking. But stay tuned for that for 2025. But we appreciate you for listening to this pod. Jack, you look like you wanted to say something before I signed off. Do you have a final thought?
I just wanted to say job's not finished, Chris. There's a lot of offseason still left. I know it's only about 2.5 months now from pitchers and catchers reporting, but job's not finished.
Job is not finished. There is work to be done. There will be work to be done on this podcast when the Mets make those moves for us to discuss. Make sure that you rate, review, subscribe to the podcast wherever you get your podcast. The best thing that you can do to help us grow this show. Again, December, the best month since we took over doing this podcast. So that is thanks to all of you. Let's continue that growth in 2025. And if the growth continues, we've got a lot more fun things in the works for the pod. You can catch the video version of the show over on Jack's YouTube channel, Jack McKessie on YouTube. But that is going to do it for us. Hope everybody has a great week, and we will talk to you next week. And as always, let's go Mets.
Let's go Mets.